Hi, everyone. We'll just wait for everybody to join. Boone, are you up there? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Good. Let's wait, give JP a minute. I think it's, if he's in Melbourne right now, it'd be, I think it's 7 a.m. his time right now.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Everyone's curious. I know I clicked record. I'm like paranoid it works. So if you can record this, please do.
I see it blinking, recording.
It is? Okay, good. Oh, I see it. Oh, yeah, there it is at the top. Nice. With the Coke, I know you're backing me up. I'm doing it on my computer too. Um, Sorry, guys, I don't happen with the Zcash space. I just, like I said, brain farted. Didn't click record. Um, if you're curious, you have to select record when you when you first set the space up, which is kind of odd. You'd think they'd give you the option once it starts going.
Yeah, all good. I'm recording as well, just as a backup. And when it came to the Maya and Zcash, I'm recording like the THORChain eco, so that's why I kind of slide on the Maya as well. So, but yeah, people, just let me know if you like me to cover THORChain and the THORChain sister or the sexy Mexican sister Maya as well. I can cover all the Maya stuff as well. So just let me know, and I will recording those as well.
Great. And while we're waiting for JP, I've been talking to Patriot Sounds and Eric from Mocha and some other people about using like Restream or some platform where we can like actually do video and record our faces and then have it stream onto like YouTube and other platforms, all at the same time simultaneously. And it can do it on Twitter, but I don't think like people can't like on a space people can request to come up to talk, but you can't do it if we're doing the live stream. Or if you do, I think it might be convoluted how to get there. So we're sticking with the space for now. Maybe we'll try and do some kind of hack job where we do the space and Google Meet at the same time. That's what we tried to do before on the Zcash call, but we had a little few, doing something for the first time. We had some glitches, but maybe we'll try it again. Maybe it'll work a bit better the next time.
It was excellent try. I actually saw that. At the moment, there is no perfect solution for that. So there is no X-Base with video and asking for the states.
Yeah.
So when you're having a Google Meet or on the StreamYard and you send out the link so people can join, if you are going to ask questions on X, you don't have the video feed there, so it's going to be funky. So
And then
there is no. I've looked around, so there's no good solution at the moment. So it's going to be this kind of like a wonky way. But I actually enjoyed when you and Patriot enabled the cameras and stuff like that. So I can stitch together this when you guys. I can have the audio from the X and the video from the Google Meet or the StreamYard from the YouTube. I can work around, do some magic.
And another thing too, the Google Meet is if somebody comes up on the space to talk, we'd have to somehow, that's not recorded on the Google Meet. They'd have to, somebody to take like the time and energy to splice it. I don't know if it's even worth it. But yeah, I don't know how that would work. But the idea is trying to start get our faces and have some video content. So when we put on YouTube, it's a bit more not just audio. Yeah, hopefully you'd think Twitter would get on if Elon is so gung-ho about making X the ultimate platform where you can do everything on it. They should figure out some kind of a video for spaces.
I just saw like one of the biggest streamers on Twitch, Asmongold. He was posting about talking with Elon about upgrading, like making X streamable similar to Twitch. So maybe that will have the features we're looking for.
Oh, cool.
Also, do we have any, like, Chad, do you have any interest in coming up? Like, there's some questions about like technical stuff that I don't know. Would you be willing to like be a input for technical stuff?
I don't want to put, if people want to come in and listen and be a fly in the wall, I don't want to put them on the spot to come up and talk.
I just asked them. No.
Yeah, and I'm keeping an eye on the request there. So anybody is welcome to come up. What I was thinking is getting, having JP and you, Boone, just kind of each take turns going over your positions and kind of talking it out, and then opening up the floor for anyone else to jump in. I've messaged JP on Telegram and Twitter. I don't know if anybody else knows him or has a way to contact him to say, hey, we're waiting. Maybe I'll start a little bit. Let's do some background. What prompted this space and this conversation was an exploit on, is it Cetus? Is that how you say it? A DEX on Sui, and they had, I think it was 230 million, 220 million was taken from a exploit on a smart contract. And I believe 80 million of it was able to leave, and 160 million was frozen by Sui validators, by their nodes. And it raised the question, the debate, what should be done? Should the Sui nodes give the money back to Cetus, to the users, or is code law and the hackers should be able to get away with it? And it brings up the whole debate and question about permissionless, censoring transactions. Are nodes supposed to step in on situations like this? And then that spilled over into THORChain and the app layer in Regira, because THORChain is launching its own smart contract platform, which will have basically same thing, same idea as Cetus, where maybe a smart contract gets exploited and the attacker is able to drain funds from Regira, from the app layer. And then this sparked a conversation. Well, Boone, you started it, asking, what is THORChain's stance on this? What are THORChain nodes going to do? Did I summarize it well enough, Boone? Is that anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I just will point out that like the way that like the very, very beginning of this, as far as I was concerned, is I posted on one of those Sui threads and I just said THORChain doesn't censor, which I thought was pretty non-controversial, given everything we went through with the Bybit hack. And I just assumed that was our policy, right? We don't censor, we're permissionless, that's our ethos. But then JP replied to me and he said, to be fair, if a Regira app was hacked, I'd expect the nodes to halt the chain before user funds were bridged out. And I was like, whoa, that's not what I was expecting, and we should talk about this. And so that's how it started, as far as like, I see it.
Well, let's get into your position then. And do you care to expand on that a bit further? maybe help explain to people why you think
Well, JP's
the
here,
node
and
should.
I'd actually, I mean, I think it makes more sense to start with his position. But yeah, either way.
Okay, all right, I do see him. JP, I'll wait for you to. If I can see if I can invite you.
While JP's like waiting, I'm curious to ask Boone, like, if THORChain, the base layer was hacked, or like say that, something happened and there's funds, scheduled to go out, and do you think nodes should pause in that scenario?
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
And so how do you differentiate? Like, why treat the base chain differently than the app chain, app layer?
Yeah. So I mean, this gets into like, I guess one kind of place to start is I see running a DEX as a very different thing than running a smart contract platform. Like a DEX is essentially a business. It's it should be self-interested and profit maximizing. And the whole point of the node operators is to secure exogenous capital. That's their job, is to protect the funds on the base layer. And I would contrast that. So that's like a DEX, right? And then the app layer is a smart contract platform. And my thinking is that the value of such things is that they're credibly neutral. Like, you look at the two largest crypto tokens in the space, Bitcoin and Ethereum. Those are like Bitcoin, I think everyone agrees, is the most unambiguously credibly neutral token, and like, I think that's a large reason why it has such value. It is truly permissionless, decentralized. Like there's no take backsies, and I just think that's a very valuable property.
Well,
And
that's not true though. That's not true. Like, Bitcoin has take backsies, and so does Ethereum. They both have done that historically.
well, I mean, sure, if you want to go way back, but like I don't think.
So if they don't do it in the last 6 months, then that's different than like 3 years ago.
Well, okay, but the very fact that you're bringing this up shows how like it detracts from their credibility that they've done that in the past. Like that, like to me,
No, I'm not. No, no, no. I'm not saying that. You're saying that they have no take backsies, and that's why they're so valuable. And I'm pointing out that that's a not true statement.
I mean, we can just agree to disagree, but I don't think you could do the takes backsies now. Like, yes, they both did it in the past, but I don't think that's possible now. And so I guess that's
It
the
it
distinction.
100% is possible. You think if Bitcoin had another issue with an infinite mint problem, and there was 81 trillion tokens minted on the Bitcoin blockchain, that they would just say, yeah, fuck it, whatever.
I mean, not like that, but like I guess what I'm saying is like I don't think they would ever fork the chain for a hack, like, which is different than if like the core protocol of Bitcoin got messed up somehow.
Which happened, right?
Huh?
Chad, can you explain what you're saying? What happened on Bitcoin and Ethereum? What were the take? What
So
did they do?
so there's two kind of Bitcoin has had several occasions in its past where there was major exploits, like infinite mint problems. Some of them were exploited and some were not, but the more famous one, I think it was like, I want to say like 2012 or maybe 2013.
I think 2010.
There was, or whatever the year was. I don't remember the year, but like there was an ability for a miner to basically use like an int overflow thing that allow you to mint the total number the maximum size that a number can be, which is like, I don't know the exact number. It's like 81 trillion something or some number. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but so this miner actually had increased the supply from 10 million or 15 million, whatever it was at the time, tokens to 81 trillion. Right. And then there was a whole process to take backsies and reduce the supply back to the 15 million number. That actually happened. And then there were on Ethereum, there was the famous, the DAO, the first, I think it was the first DAO in its history, I believe. But there was a DAO hack and there was this massive thing. That's what we call ETH Classic. ETH Classic is the original Ethereum chain that was not the fork that they switched over to. And ETH Classic is, basically a dead zombie chain, right? Because that's the one that didn't follow the fork. Most of the community did. Like, I'm just saying that, like, you can't make the argument that these chains are valuable because they have no take backsies, because they both have multiple instances of take backsies, first of all, and the value of these tokens had nothing to do with that. The value tokens derive from other aspects or attributes of community and tokens and
Okay, but I still feel like you're not
moat.
addressing my main argument, which is I don't think
Which
it's
is what?
possible for either of them to do takes backsies now.
Why? Why do you say that?
I don't think they would get consensus on it.
So if there was another same situation happens, and there's now 21 trillion tokens
okay,
in a
but
single wallet, what would happen then?
all right, but like I think it's fair to draw a distinction. Like so the like a mint like problem like that
Yeah.
is
What would happen?
well, hold on. I'm trying to draw a
Okay.
distinction between like that.
Okay.
Like,
All right, go ahead.
it's like a misfunctioning of the core protocol, right? And there
Yeah.
probably would be consensus to fix that problem, but
Sure.
like I would say what we're talking about is a much better comparison to the Mt. Gox hack, which crushed Bitcoin prices for years, tons of users lost funds, and they did not fix that. Like that's that state.
Right. But what does Mt. Gox have to do with Bitcoin? It's an external centralized, exchange that got
Well,
ass fucked.
I guess that's
Right.
my point is what does
Like,
a hack on Ruggiera have to do with the app layer? It's a separate
but
thing.
Mt. Gox is a separate thing. It's literally not even a part of the chain, right? Ruggiera is part of the ecosystem. That's very different.
I mean, like, would Ethereum like fork the chain or roll back if Uniswap got hacked?
I don't think I don't think they would in that scenario, but it's obviously a different thing because they don't have the capability to do.
That's what I'm saying. They don't have
what
the
it is.
capability to do takes backsies. That's like my point.
Maybe a better
Yeah, they're not.
comparison is on Ethereum, any exploits that have happened there. Like like on Ronin network, 600 million hack, or on Poly network. What about those? Should they have been rolled back?
Is that a question for me or a question for somebody else?
No, for you, Chad, actually. Like, so instead of like those are that happened on Ethereum. Or sorry, well, on a layer one, and it's like, in my mind, that's similar to the Mt. Gox hack. So it's, or do you say no, they're different? Really, those hacks are not similar to the Mt. Gox hack. They're totally different.
To me, they're like it's not part of the actual chain. It's an external, like exonerous system, right? Like they have no relationship with Ethereum other than just holding a token, right? Like, so think about like the scenario that like I don't think you're kind of appreciating, is that like say Ruggieri does get hacked, right? And Ruggieri is, for all intents and purposes, is running 10 apps or 100 apps on the protocol, and now they got this like $100 million hole or something like this. How do they come back from that? Like, do they just die and the team goes, oh shit, walk away? Then all those apps just kind of die as well. I mean, what would you like to see happen?
Well, yeah, I mean that's how business free market works. You have a failed business, it fails, you're done. Right? How are the other hacks on Ethereum been handled on those smart contracts? Like with those platforms, like those tokens go to zero. The Ethereum network isn't bailing anybody out.
Okay, I'll jump in here if I can. So there's three ways you can look at this. One is what in past has happened on the major networks, Bitcoin and Ethereum, and that was Chad's argument. It was actually they have gone through instance where they have done takes backsies, and Bone's arguing, well, they couldn't pull it off today. Well, that really depends on the nature of the incident. And if Chad was saying, hey, there was another infinite mint on a like an int overflow or underflow happening on Bitcoin, then you can bet like Sailor and Bitcoin, Binance and Coinbase are going to coordinate with the miners a take backseat. And by the way, it's not actually that hard. You may need to hard fork, you may not need to hard fork. I mean, Bitcoin has to hard fork anyway when it comes to addressing quantum resistant claims into the future, or at least a convoluted soft fork. So it's difficult to say what would happen, but it really comes down to social consensus. Back in 2010, the social consensus was, it wasn't fair for someone to have an infinite amount of Bitcoin in their wallet after a malicious attack, and the rest of the people have basically nothing. So that's when Satoshi jumped on and reverted the chain by, I think it was like 8 hours of blocks. And the same with the DAO hack. And then because the social consensus for the DAO hack was to follow the new chain, it wasn't fair for this hacker to have, I think it was like 20% of the supply of ETH at the time. So they all followed the fork of Ethereum and not stay on the original chain. And let's look in past of what THORChain's already done over the last 8 years. Well, in 2021, there was hacks extending to the LPs and specifically Ethereum and ERC20 tokens. And there was actually hack attempts, and that's when the protocol essentially paused, reevaluated its security posture. And so you could argue that THORChain's already shown that it's not willing to tolerate users losing its capital. And Bone's arguing, well, it's different in the app layer because the app layer just supposedly addresses with that can do things. Well, actually, THORChain's module account is an address that can do things. And the module account was holding the user LP tokens, LP assets. And that's when the social consensus in 2021 was to fix it up. That was clearly a bug, and restore that. And that was the social consensus. So the case, and if you zoom out, like literally last week or a few days ago on Sui with Cedar's protocol, and I think the valets are passing right now, there was a large app. It wasn't part of Sui's baseline chain. Well, it was basically an address that can do things. And in this case, it was the liquidity, like Uniswap fork. And that went through a large hack. And then the chain, essentially, because it's a Byzantine fault-tolerant network and it can do this, they've all clearly, obviously looks like the Sui valets are going to return the user capital into the CEDAS recovery address. So I think it really comes down to what will be the social consensus. There's some threshold at which the valets will organize and do something, fix things up, and some threshold at which they won't. And my argument was, we don't actually know what that threshold is. If someone comes in the Discord and says they've lost 10,000 rune from a phishing attack, there's no amount of crying and tweeting and discording. No node or dev will ever entertain a funds recovery procedure for someone losing 10,000 rune and a phishing attack. But if the reserve, which has 75 million runes today, has an issue, and by the way, there was actually a bug in 2021 where the reserve funds were at risk, and I think another bug in 2022, which we paid out to this grey hat bounty hunter, where the reserve in past has been at risk for a bug, and Chad's been aware of these. If the reserve, which is just a module, an address that has a lot of rune, 75 million rune, if that was ever at risk and exploited, and the funds were sitting there on address in one giant streaming swap to like all of the Bitcoin, all of the ETH, all of the stablecoins in the network, you can guarantee that the nodes will self-organize and do a funds recovery. Because if that rune is allowed to stream out, it will basically take all of the exogenous capital out of the network, and the network will have to start from zero again. And that's like a worst case scenario. So you can get like that is the threshold at which nodes will definitely do something, and someone losing 10,000 rune is threshold which they definitely won't do something. And my point is, we actually don't know that threshold. We don't know ahead of time. Okay, this is it. It's just we have to take this case by case. And getting back to THORChain's actual technical system, it is a state machine that relies on 2/3 consensus. And this is not just in the handling of its key value store. This is in actually handling the funds themselves through the MPC network. The MPC network is 2/3 consensus as well. And that is built on the state machine itself, which is 2/3. So all THORChain needs is 2/3 of the validators to agree, to jump online and agree, and they can do anything. 2/3 of validators today can already steal all the money in the network. They can already take the entire rune, divvy it up to themselves and walk away. They can already change the state machine set of rules from anything that's valid today to anything that's valid tomorrow. And they have been doing that for the last 8 years. And so when we look at it, THORChain, in my opinion, is this dynamic social consensus layer that tries to make money on exogenous capital, which is the Bitcoin, ETH, and stablecoins and its pools, tries to offer liquidity, and then tries to return that to its participants in a decentralized way. But it does have a state machine, and that state machine has to be resilient to an extremely dynamic environment, has to respond to Bitcoin, Ethereum, all these external chains and all the nuances and gas problems and network problems and blah, blah, blah. And that's why it's built with, make halts and make memes and et cetera, et cetera. It has to be resilient and dynamic. It cannot stay stagnant. If it was stagnant, it would essentially stop working years ago. So my simple argument was, we don't know that threshold. We should just rely on the nodes to change, but we should not be surprised if one day we wake up, there's an issue that the nodes have to deal with, and they vote to deal with it.
And you're saying the threshold is basically just going to be, there's no way to know because we don't know who the majority of the nodes are going to be at that time. We don't know what their values and beliefs are and goals are. And, the majority of nodes could agree on one thing today, but they might not agree on the same thing 2 years from now. It's in constant flux.
Yeah, I think it's the kind of like analogy like I like to think about is like the Supreme Court in America, like it determines what is or is not constitutional. Like that is the definitive small group of people, right? That decide that this thing is constitutional or unconstitutional. And you can disagree with that all you want. You can agree or disagree. It doesn't really matter. But they are the ones that define that something is or is not. And so the validators are conceptually the same thing, right? By a 2/3 majority, they define what is going to happen, and there's nothing you can really do about it. And like that is the result. That is what it is. Whatever they collectively decide to do. So if there was an exploit of some kind, and somebody does like a make pause to pause the network, and another node, no, we should resume. There's a make resume, and there's another make pause, another make pause, another make. You're going to see like some kind of battle happening as the nodes are like voting back and forth to figure out what is the action going to take place. But in the end, it's going to be the nodes that decide what to do.
Yeah, and this is important, and this is why the network has churning. I mean, if you look at actually THORChain's churning system, most other blockchains will think we're absolutely nuts. Like the whole system kicks out a bunch of validators every 3 days and pulls in a set of new validators, and that's been the design from the start. It's this aggressively churning dynamic system that tries to follow the path of least resistance to some distant point, and it relies on the fact that anyone can join the network if you acquire Rune or you run a node and you can get enough bonds. And it's what are the ideals? What's the vision for that? We've already seen this in case where node operators, and I know this for a fact, in February when there was this huge pressure the protocol was going through, node operators were challenged because they were like, I thought we were just, things got real for them very fast. And some of them didn't like it. And I know some nodes who left in February because the pressure was getting too much. Although perceived pressure was getting too much. And they were like, you know what, we're stepping out for now. And other node operators were like, well, I think this is important. Net was making money and jumped in. So this dynamic churning system is what enables the protocol to be catch me if you can. It enables it to move on from potential stagnation point. And if you look at other networks where the validators can stagnate because you get this large entrenched interest and they basically never budge because there is no need for them to leave and et cetera, and there's no mechanism for them to leave, they become entrenched, and whereas THORChain can stay live and dynamic and resilient, and that's a very powerful feature. So we don't know the consensus building set of validators in 1 year, let alone 10 years into the future. And we just have to rely on every day the protocol trying to like churn its way towards some future point. And that's really important.
JP, I want to actually talk about February. So you made countless comments that THORChain doesn't differentiate between, like, you can't know what are good or bad transactions. And so, that's why the swap should continue and keep going. Ethereum isn't stopping anything. Bitcoin network, they're not stopping anything. Why should THORChain, right? It's neutral, permissionless network. Wouldn't that same argument apply to the app layer? If something happened there that maybe people disagree with or saying is wrong, but THORChain doesn't take a stance on right or wrong. It just processes
Well,
transactions.
the app layer is permissioned, right?
So yeah, I think I can jump in on a stronger argument. So
Wait, do you mind if I cut in for a second?
yeah, go.
We kind of got into this sideways where like I started talking with Chad and then JP. Like, if we could like just take a step back for a second, like, so my hope for this discussion, and I'm sure there'll be many more to come on this topic, though, is that eventually our community and hopefully the node operators settle on some kind of like relatively clear expectations for how THORChain will handle an exploit of the app layer ahead of time. And like, of course, like the points you were making about 2/3 of the nodes control everything. Of course, I don't think anyone's disputing that. And like, yeah, no one knows how how the nodes are gonna vote in the when it's happening. But like, for example, like, why do we have ADRs? Can you like speak to that real quick?
Yeah, ADRs are a process by which essentially it's an architectural design record. So it's a record of why a particular architectural design decision was made. In the case of THORChain, it's been historically used to provide a baseline document that the node operators essentially opt into first by saying, vote ADR X on. And then the devs will go, all right, well, we have to go and implement the ADR that's been proposed.
Right.
So
Okay.
there,
Yeah. So what I would argue is like the ADR it's a method for arriving at social consensus before the code is implemented. And like I'm that's what I'm seeking here. It doesn't have to be my personal druthers, but like I would like there to be it'd be great if we could get some general social consensus ahead of time, the same way that happens with ADRs. Like maybe we could come up with some kind of like rubric or flow chart, like if X happens then Y, and then it could just be a document, and then the nodes can vote, do we agree on this or not? And just and of course that vote isn't binding down the road whenever an exploit does happen, but like that's what I think would be great, just so that everybody has a relatively clear expectation of what would happen. Like the rules aren't ambiguous. And so like,
right. Yeah. So there is actually a draft ADR called ADR 20.0.0 that contains a rough template or document about how the appler should be essentially, or how it has been designed and how it should be handled in the future. And that's in draft status. It should be getting moved to proposed next month. There's been a lot of flights, a lot of node operator thrash the last couple months. So we've been holding off until there's been a bit of peace and quiet. We've actually had these apps out, the very first ones. Now, I really want to answer Kenton's question about how does censoring a transaction with THORChain different to censoring a swap over network. So on the first case is there is like some guy tweeting on Twitter with some elliptic tag, this is a bad address, is not, it is like, is their opinion, right? There's no like court of opinion of good addresses, bad addresses, like some like global governance council and others should be, because everything is just the way these networks work is, well, if you can for example, the Bybit hack, we actually don't know if the CEO just signed the transaction himself. Like, we have a theory that there was a supply chain attack and there was actually a malformed contract interaction sent to a non-intended address, but we don't, there's no proof, and neither can there be, if the Bybit CEO and his two just literally signed that transaction to an intended address, right? Like, how do you know it wasn't unintended or intended? You just don't know, right? So all this labeling of good flows and bad flows is just someone's opinion. and it's someone's theory. And so when you come to THORChain and say, hey, THORChain node operators, my opinion is this is XYZ, no, and I want you to all follow it. These node operators, one, they don't have a mechanism to put that metadata in on that transaction. Like there's no field on a transaction that says this transaction is good or bad, right? It wasn't designed that way. And or it could have been designed that way. And like, where do you get your data from? Where do these Thor node operators get? So right now on Bitcoin and Ethereum, every node operator is connected to a full node. So when a transaction comes in, they're not just relying on a third-party announcement of this. They are literally looking at the chain state synced on the node on disk, seeing a transaction independently to every other node, and then broadcasting that into the state machine, gossiping it first and then broadcasting it. And so then to pull that off where funds are labeled good or bad, you would need a like some kind of network built, propagating system built, where this information is passed around. And that just cannot exist because the nodes only look at what's on the Bitcoin chain, what's on the Ethereum chain, and there's no such labeling of funds possible on Bitcoin or Ethereum, right? So they're just reporting what they see. And so if you came up to them and said, hey, the Bybit hack, these funds are stolen 100%, cross my heart, hope to die, there's no mechanism for the node operators to like add that information to the network, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is the protocol has a user proposition. The user proposition is always, can we get 100+ random people on the internet, anonymous as well, to put something upstake and coordinate to run a decentralized exchange? They don't even know each other. They don't need to talk to each other. They don't need to trust each other. But they will all work together to hold exogenous capital in their wallets, their shared wallets, and then do swaps, the liquidity. And it was an experiment. Like it wasn't, before THORChain existed, no one had actually pulled off something of this scale before. And so back in 2019, 2020, it's like it was still an experiment. Could this work? Well, now when we can see it can work, you can get 100+ anonymous people on the internet to buy server boxes and pump them up to the internet and do something to hold hundreds of millions of dollars at stake and perform actions over it, right? And so that's the experiment. The experiment has been answered. So when it comes to, well, what transactions are permitted on this network? Well, it's liquidity transactions, it's unbonding transactions, bonding transactions, etc. But one of the most important things is the network has to make money on those funds. Else, if there were no swaps on the protocol right now and nobody was using it, right? Node operators have two options. The first option is to just freaking leave, sell the rune and leave the network, and it slowly dumps down to zero. But what if the node operators couldn't even leave? What if the network disabled churn and paused it indefinitely? What would a node operator do? Well, the only other option, if the network is paused and churn and it can't get its room back, is to just literally take all the money. And we've already seen this happen on StageNet, a single chain chaos net, right? There was a Ragnarok. The protocol had 14 node operators, and it basically like went into this kind of like destruct mode, and it slowly churned 40 valets down to 4, right? And then the fast 4 node operators just would not leave, and there was still like $12 million on those vaults after it done this Ragnarok and tried to give everyone the money back. But it's still, I can't remember the actual issue, but it still couldn't finish the Ragnarok. And side note, we were the last 4 nodes. And so we decided, well, we run all 4 nodes because we were the last 4 nodes on the network because we told everyone to fucking leave. We were shutting it down and we'd launched main chat, multi-chain chaos now. And so we just literally took all the money out of the vaults and did a giant on-chain transaction to give the main people the money back. That already happened. So I'm saying like the nodes, the THORChain today has a choice, has 3 choices. Can you work together to do swaps, or do you all just leave, or do you all just take money in the vaults? So it's the nodes are not trying to follow some kind of the single purpose is to take those funds in the vault and make money, right? And to provide a system, a state machine, and environment to do so. And that does So, and that does the basically liquidity swaps. And for now, it's going to field an app layer. And so I just want to pause there. And I hope everyone's been following. Just want to ask if everyone's been following me today.
So that was a lot of information, JP.
Boone, do you want to add to that or ask question, interject or anything?
I mean, there is one distinction that I do feel is important, and I think there's a lot of confusion of can and should. And so like if we look at the title of this space, look at the top, it's like should THORChain nodes intervene? And of course they can, as JP rightly points out, 2/3 of nodes can do whatever they want. I think everyone's aware of this. But the question is not if they can, the question is if they should. And I think it would behoove everybody if we focus there rather than the can. And I don't know, how do you guys feel about that?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you the way that I think about it. My perspective is a little bit simpler than JP's. Like for me, like this is how I look at it. I want THORChain to win, right? I want THORChain to be successful, right? Like that's kind of primo number one, right? And I don't really care about outside of THORChain, right? Whether you're Bybit or something else. Like what I want is THORChain to be successful. And so yes, if there's like a bug that could cause the 71 million rune in the reserve to go away, then yes, I'm going to fix that, and I would expect that nodes would operate to assist in that, because if it, as JP pointed out, if it got lost and all the Exoner's assets are gone, and all this the experiment is over more or less. And so we are all like self-interested, right? We all want THORChain to succeed. We all want Rune to perform well, and get more seed collection and all that kind of stuff. And so like when it comes to like the app layer, like it depends on the individual like circumstance. Like to JP's example of like if somebody just screwed up and signed the transaction wrong by accident, and they lost 10 grand, and they're all like crying about it on Twitter or Discord. That's not quite, THORChain has not lost because of that person's mistake. But if Ruji has an order book or a perps or whatever it is that has $200-300 million in it, and it gets exploited in some way, shape, or form, that loss is not just to Ruji, but it splashes upon the base layer as well, right? So for me, like I think about THORChain should be self-interested. It should be interested primarily in success of itself and not much else. And it should behave in a way that orientates itself to be successful in the long term.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I understand that. Like, I guess,
Can
like,
I
let me try to
ask?
steel man that. Like my understanding, JP, I would love you and Chad to both respond to this but like mine, like to me, thinking the best argument for your side is like, if it's possible to save users funds, we should do that, right? Like theft is bad, preventing theft is a good thing. So if we can save users funds, we should. And users will trust Rujira if we can protect them from exploits. And if we don't trust, and users won't trust Rujira if their funds get stolen. And as Chad was just speaking to, a successful exploit would reduce the TVL of Rujira and therefore would reduce THORChain's income. Like, have I summarized that well? Is there anything I missed?
Yeah, no, that's generally what I'm saying. I got my decentralization kind of viewpoint isn't like decentralized for the purpose of decentralization. It's not just like an ideological stance. It's pragmatic, and it's in the goal to make THORChain as successful as possible as a protocol.
As far as I understood, JP's whole idea was like the node's whole idea is to make money, and from the Boone, what I noticed that is that let's say we have 50 apps on the app layer, Levana gets compromised. It's the cash cow. It brings in the one fourth of the revenue for THORChain. So where do we draw the line where we involve as a nodes? I think that's the Boone's question. Like, what is the expectation where we get involved, or we just clap our hands, say, "Oh, oops, that's just a single user error. We don't involve." Oh, it's the cash cow of our app layer, or our it brings in the most money for our base layer, so we should get involved. Or maybe even the exploit happens in the base layer, so we should definitely get involved. For example, we saved the THORFi. We really got involved. So I think what Boone meant is like, where do we draw the line? Where we what is the expectation of the protocol involvement when we stop or we get involved?
That's the thing. It's like you and I cannot
Yeah, we
draw a
can't.
line because we
No,
are
but
not
that's what I think.
two-thirds
Yeah, that's what the
majority,
Boone was asking.
right?
So if the answer is we cannot, that's perfect. That's the. I think there is no correct or wrong answer. Even like we cannot decide where we draw the line is perfect. Is even the answer, and maybe then
Right.
we can. If there is no line where we can like draw the line, is we can set up the expectation. So if this action harms base protocol, then we step in. Like, let's say Levana gets compromised. Like, let's say it's one fourth of our revenue. Then we step in, say like, hey, we reverse the transaction. So it's I think it's like the expectation of the question that we should maybe discuss, or I think.
Yep.
This is like to kind of actually combine what Boone and Chad are both saying. Chad's interested in THORChain being successful, making money, and Boone is as well, by saying, if you have like an ADR, have some kind of conversations, kind of record of like how we expect to act, and that could provide confidence to the market to use AppLayer, because everyone understands, the majority of nodes could always change their minds, but at least there's some kind of game plan in place, some intended course of action, and that might encourage more money, bigger money, to come use AppLayer. Yeah,
because
instead of
people
this
know
big
that we will
question mark,
protect
we
them.
don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's hard to answer that question because like it's very conditional based on the circumstances of the incident, right?
And maybe that's what we're trying to drill down, is like, what is, is it the dollar amount? Is it how it was stolen? Like, is it an actual exploit of the code,
So
or is it an
interestingly,
exploit of the economic design where the code is working as intended, but somebody found like, well, if I sell this here, buy that there, and withdraw this there, I can actually get something going. Does any of that? Yeah.
and so this should be put into the draft ADR 20. What are the expectations to start off with? And this is why that document is still in draft status. Now, I do want to actually like revisit the Bybit thing again. If so there was pressure from external parties to halt the network and save the funds and return the funds, blah blah blah. But Bybit and these parties don't run Thor nodes, right? So my actual response to them at the time, and every time I got hit up, I said, look, the Thor nodes control the network. They have voted yes or no. If you want a seat at the table, go buy yourself a Thor node and vote. And like, and that remains true. Like, there's nothing stopping Bybit to have run and acquired 20 million rune very quickly. I mean, Bybit themselves have like 15 million rune in the 8 million rune in the vaults. Like, they could have actually participated on chain governance themselves, bought the rune or used the rune, run some nodes, churned them in, and voted how they saw fit, and that would have been fine, right? That's their opinion as node operators, sovereign node operators. And just like Jeb was saying, there are a set of judges who get to enforce and interpret the US Constitution, decides whether it's good or not. And but that is the control process. No one can rock up and be that judge. THORChain is different. Anyone can rock up and be a node operator with the right amount of rune or provided rune. Now, getting back to like what are these thresholds? my argument is we don't actually know these thresholds. We just, you got to look at something in the future, and the node operators are going to have to vote and figure it out for themselves. And there's no amount of like, any hack more than 1 million rune should get looked at, and anything below shouldn't get looked at. That's not how it can work, right? You just have to rely on the node operators in the future. You can try and put in thresholds of like, okay, I mean, there is a threshold in the ADR that says, generally we're going to try and stick away from apps that are going to accrue more than 10 million rune or 10% of the liquidity, etc., etc. But there's nothing stopping an app blowing through those limits on, in the life cycle of Ruggiero, right? So you just have to deal with it. Now getting back to what should the node operators try and prioritize in this future hypothetical scenario? Well, it's two things. One is developer user experience, right, and user experience. And the node operators are not trying to prioritize for black hat bounty user experience. Like the THORChain shouldn't be the best UX possible for a black hat. You can rock up, take a bunch of money, and leave, and keep 100%, and there's no repercussions or like we're not trying to optimize for black hat bounty hunters. We have in the past tried to optimize for grey hat bounty hunters or even white hats with the the delayed outbounds, the bounty that we've put up for developers, etc., etc. But primarily, it's THORChain's users that are node operators. It's users who provide liquidity and use the app layer, and also as developers. So not just app layer developers, but also wallet developers. Like swap kit, Dorito kit, etc., etc. Right. So you're trying to prioritize for their user experience. And I'm telling you, having been a developer in crypto for the last 10 years and gone through many issues and hacks and exploits, vulnerabilities, blah, blah, the most debilitating experience you can go through as a developer in crypto is waking up in the morning and your contract or your protocol, your state machine has been hacked and the funds like running away from you. And you've got 1,000 users in your DMs or, screaming blue murder and like it wasn't even your fault. It was just, whether it was audits or layers or security, it may not have been your fault. And that is the moment at which you can just quit forever, right? So the app layer should try and prioritize a good developer user experience so it can foster an environment of like dozens of an ecosystem of developers. And a part of that developer user experience, apart from being easy to get secure code on the chain and viewable and good API access and and a good process to follow, part of the developer user experience is actually having someone in your corner, in your back, to like jump in with you and help sort out an issue that's gone wrong. And on Binance Smart Chain, and in 2021, I was part of a team that went through anonymous DeFi protocol that got hacked for $30 million. And then that $30 million literally just walked out of Binance Smart Chain onto the mainnet. And the Binance allies, who are all centralized, all run by Binance, just didn't do anything. They were just like, all right, see ya, have fun. And that was really, 2021 was like a million hacks, right? But none of the chains were doing anything, and all the developers were getting like bitch slapped all over the place by this script kiddies in Canada or wherever, Abraham Isenhoff or whatever it is, the mega markets guy, or I don't know, North Korea, I don't know, right? And it was just a really bad user experience, and users were sick of getting their funds, pwned on these DeFi protocols. And fast forward to today or yesterday, last week, when Cetus protocol got hacked for a huge amount of money, and the validators jumped in and said, you know what? At first, the validators were just ignoring transactions, right? So so this actor, if he had wanted his transaction process, should have become a SUI validator and processed his own transactions, right? And then the second thing is the validators are now clearly going to like vote up to do like an Ethereum DAO hack funds transfer back into the user owner. So it's does that make sense? It's like, what are we trying to prioritize here? What are the nodes trying to like build here? What are they trying to offer? Anyone can be a node operator. Anyone has a seat at the table if you can run a node and cast a vote. And we're trying to build something that works.
The nice thing with the SUI Cetus example is that we're going to get our answer over the next several months, a year or two, kind of what to do. If SUI goes on to succeed, Cetus succeeds, everyone's happy, the market supports it, and they go on to continue to be a good success. That's a good case study for us to fall back on. If it turns out SUI loses credibility, nobody wants to use the network anymore because they're playing judge, jury, executioner with users' funds, and it starts going nowhere. Again, we get our answer what to do. So maybe that's our threshold, or that's what we look at, and basically use them as our case study, and that'll kind of give us an idea how to approach it.
Yeah, but the environment will always change. So at first we thought like the fiat currency is great, but now we understand it's not great. So whatever decisions were made 10 years ago, they are always subject to change as well. So we have to keep that in mind.
I'm curious, guys. I want to throw an idea out there. Oh wait, 8bytes. You have your hand up. Sorry, buddy. I don't know if you've had it for a while. Just now, if you want to come.
Yeah, I mean, I'm along the same alignment as Boone, but I would say that the main issue is really with censorship, right? I mean, what happened with SUI is that they censored signed transactions that uh, were like validators decided to not include those transactions, which is why funds couldn't be moved. And just like out of curiosity, just to clear it first, right? But from do the Thor nodes, like let's say an exploit happens on the app layer, say with perps or something, and a hacker is trying to route like 100 million funds, right? If they use IBC, right, versus withdrawing from secured assets, well, my assumption is that the secured assets are still there, but will the IBC go through? So I guess like that's just my first question, and then I can expand upon the censorship aspect after.
I
So
actually
thoughts
have like a whole chain of questions like in this kind of like realm. Do you mind if I like cut in 8 bytes?
Sure.
Okay, yeah. So, so this is for JP and Chad. Like my first question, and like so Alux raised this point in the Discord, and at first I didn't think it was correct, but I've changed my mind on it. How even feasible is it to stop a hack? Because let's say they drain a con.
just
Well,
quickly,
hold
yeah.
on. Like they drain an account, they swap to Rune, and then they deposit that Rune in a sex. That could happen in 2 blocks. Like there wouldn't even be time to catch it. So like that's like my first question is like, is this whole conversation relatively moot because most of the damage will be done before it like anything can even happen?
Okay, so if they do it in 2 blocks, then move into address, then that address will hold the funds. If they move into a sex, then that they would be beholden to the sex themselves. But blockchain operators can have a make halt, and halts everything. That halts rune transfers, contract initiations. Every message on THORChain grind to a halt, including message sent. The only ones that go through are like message observed, something like node stuff, right? So there's that, and then the nodes can like keep extending the halt for 1 hour at a time. So you only need like 4 or 5 nodes to get like half a day halted, and then you can put more granular halts on it. Like, okay, well, we're just going to halt this specific. Now, if there's a large amount of rune, like 75 million rune has been moved out of the reserve and is sticking in an address that wasn't a reserve address, you can guarantee node operator is going to keep that thing halted, and then do a note like an update to the system and go, oh, I'll put that room back in the reserve and fix out the bug. And that's how it happened. It's the same as secured assets. Secured assets are just like THORChain native assets that live on addresses. So the actual mechanics, if they do swap out to Bitcoin, there's a 1 hour delay or 45 minutes delay or whatever it is. And so what will happen is the secured asset will get redeemed into Bitcoin, but that Bitcoin will still be in the vaults.
Yeah, but they
All right.
don't
So,
need to swap to Bitcoin. If they just bounce to a sex, they're done. They're out.
good luck. It's
That's
fine.
that's not so technically speaking. If they bounce to a sex in 2 blocks, the network can still yank it back because the network can do a whole THORChain, which holds like rune transactions, and then
Well,
just
right, but you're not
do a
gonna.
store migration
No
and
node
move.
is gonna see a 2 block. They're not gonna catch it in time. Like I mean, it's gonna be a.
It doesn't. They don't have to catch it. That's the point. You can do it post.
Okay, so you're gonna like
Like
so they've deposited their Rune on a sex account. You're gonna and so like
I'm just saying, like, I'm not advocating for this. I'm not saying that this is what should happen. I'm only saying that in that hypothetical scenario, it is possible to, even after the room has been transferred from the hacker's wallet to, you know, Coinbase's wallet or whatever the hell the exchange might be. If you can within 30 minutes later, you can pause, you know, room transfers theoretically, and then do a store migration and just move the room back to Ruji or whatever the hell it is. Like, it is possible. Whether people decide to do that or not, like, you know, that's another topic. But you can yank it back in that scenario if you wanted
That's
to.
pretty similar, I think, to what Sui's planning to do with the funds they managed to freeze. So
Hey guys, I got to jump to another
It is.
meeting. Good chats. I'll leave you guys to keep bouncing through it, and I'll catch up on the recording later.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep. I think
later.
that's actually the easier one to rip back is the rune example. It's the harder one is actually the Bitcoin example, because you do have that outbound delay, but once the outbound delay is done, then it's gone because you can't rewrite the Bitcoin exchange, right? The Bitcoin blockchain. So it's more feasible there's more time in the rune example than there is actually in the Bitcoin example.
Right. And then my main point actually was to bring up around transaction censorship, right? And that's the idea that, like, I guess it would be probably 67% of nodes, they would need to all agree to not observe a valid signature for it to not be processed through the network. So I mean, like, this kind of it is like Bitcoin with the 51%. They can, whoever has that much hash can build the chain faster, and therefore they can ignore those transactions. But I think that's a bit like when Boone was alluding to earlier. That's a lot more difficult to actually do versus censoring a transaction on
Yeah,
intermittent.
but nodes don't have an ability to censor an individual transaction today, right? They're like, if I was a node operator and I wanted to censor a particular transaction, there's no, there's nothing in the code today that is, you know, if I wanted to change my particular node and run a different version, the sort of like a custom built thing, I guess that's theoretically possible, but I'm sure nobody does that. That mechanism doesn't actually exist. You can argue that we should have that or shouldn't have that. Either way, you can have that
Okay.
position, but there's no mechanism to silence or like in order to pull back the rune example, you'd have to pause all rune transfers across the entire protocol, do a store migration, which would take, you know, 18 hours ish or whatever it is for all the nodes to update to the new thing, and then, you know, which that is obviously
Yeah,
complicated because some won't want to do it,
that's a large economic
right?
cost. Like,
So
I don't see that really being a feasible solution. But I mean,
yeah, like I said, like I'm not saying that's what should happen or whatever. I'm just saying that is a possibility, you know, on paper.
yeah. So then, I mean, like, in that case, then really, it really, what really is important is that the ledger can't be changed going back. And I think in THORChain, like you said, with it's an aggregate of a lot of different blockchains, right? And it's creating a ledger based off of the immutable state of those blockchains. I don't really think you could even go back and change a lot of transactions unless they were like within the system itself, like rune transfers, like you just said. So I mean, like, it kind of
Yep.
invalidates that point. So say with the Bybit hack, in order for Thorchain to actually really censor that, I mean, it's a lot more. It's more different. There isn't really, like you said, like the technology to do that. So I mean, it really is permissionless in that example. Then
Correct.
so
Yeah, the funny thing is like Chainflip did choose to censor the Bybit thing, but what people don't realize is that they didn't actually do it, right? So they make an attempt to do so, but what people don't realize is that most of these channel analytics companies, as soon as you transfer those funds to 3 different wallets, it is now no longer considered to be a bad wallet. Like there's an actual system built into these things. So the Bybit could have just transferred to like you know 3 different Bitcoin
yeah.
addresses or like whatever the fucking the coin was, I forget, and then just transfer through a chain flip and it would have
Yeah, I
worked.
mean, like the
You know?
tokens are fun. Like ultimately it's UTXOs, right? So if you're trying to do a specific UTXO, well, you're gonna lose sight of it pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's messy to do it, but yeah, and that's just how it works in TradFi too. It's messy to just to
Yeah, so it really does boil
um,
down to like, okay, well, what in the case of a Rugira exploit, right? It's it's really is very much in the realm of THORChain itself and its own and its own like state machine. So like the odds of having
right.
like a hacker should be well aware of that before they even attempt like, so it might make more sense for them to disclose it through like a white hat channel, and maybe there's a better chance of them collecting funds that way, right? So actually it's good, that's really good
Right.
design. So I mean then it's
Yeah, we made a similar design to THORChain back in 2021 when the part of the reason we did the delayed outbounds thing was to make the economics of hacking the network or stealing funds to be more profitable from a white hat's perspective than it is from a black hat, because you would make more money as a white hat disclosing it, properly to the team, than if you were to try to try to yank out $20 million. You would only be able to get out 200,000 or something like this, or whatever the hell the number might be, before people would figure it out. And so you walk away with 200,000. But if you disclosed it up front as a white hat, you would have gotten maybe $500,000 out of the situation. So that was part of the design, was to reverse the economics and say it's more profitable to be a white hat than it is a black hat on THORChain's network, which kind of worked. Like, we've had a bunch of white hat disclosures over the last few years, and we haven't seen any hacks since, knock on wood, of course. We haven't seen any hacks since 2021, right? And that's in part because of the new security posture that we had taken in many different forms.
And that's why this is good to have this conversation, because, and kind of back to Boone's point about having some kind of ADR about it, where we discuss it, where if the social consensus is to intervene and to stop a hacker, that in itself might prevent an exploit, and that in itself might encourage people to
Right.
be white hats, and instead of following through
Right.
with it, to report it, because they know we're going to stop it. They
But
know the nodes are intending to stop it anyway.
But this is the same thing with Kenton. You've been talking here and there in the past about removing the delayed outbound because you think it does more damage than good. And I've had friends say, like, oh, well, like the delayed outbound's like never been used to stop a hack, But I would argue that, like, maybe that's why it hasn't been hacked, is because they know they can't extract the funds in the end, right? So even if they had the exploit, you know, they would have disclosed it responsibly versus actually trying to execute it, because the delayed outbound exists. Even though it's never been like utilized to stop an attack in its history, the fact that it exists creates the incentives for people to not make the attempt to make the hack to begin with.
I totally understand. I totally get it. I get it, man. I really do. And it's impossible to know either way. Yeah,
Sure.
I'm taking the stance, right? I think I'd rather take the risk of not having it, because I feel like back to what you said about THORChain succeeding and growing. I don't understand, like, it's at least on smaller transactions. If it's a $5 or $10 million trade, okay, fine, maybe do an hour, but
Yeah, the problem with that, though, is that you
break
can
them up.
break it up your attack in the smaller things, and then you let through all the small things, and all of a sudden 10 million's
Yeah,
out.
it
That's why it's designed the way it's designed. Is like it looks at the total amount of value being pushed out of the network rather than like the size of an individual trade or
I
transaction.
know, it just makes it unusable on the smaller scale. That's my issue. And at some point, it's kind
I
of
mean,
like,
that's less true in like bull markets than it is in bear markets, right?
yeah,
Because in bull markets and REITs prices are doing well, but then naturally the outbound delay is significantly reduced. But in bear markets, when RUNE's price is relatively low, then the delayed outbound is more sensitive, right?
mhm. Well, we can this.
And we can change that, but I don't know. It's an interesting debate. I guess I've always taken like a more of a security position personally over usability, because when it comes to security, like, you're either on the ease of use versus secure, like on the
Yep.
spectrum. And generally speaking, if you make anything easier to use, you generally make it less secure as well, right? And for me, like, what's most important about THORChain's kind of like future is that that it becomes like a fundamental pillar of infrastructure for the entire cryptocurrency industry. And it's not going to do that if we look at ease of use to be more important than security, in my view.
I get it. I agree. It's a spectrum, but it's kind of like I liken it to human beings. You know, the more vulnerable you are as a human with your thoughts and emotions, yeah, you open yourself up to be hurt, but you also open yourself up to intimacy and having a really fruitful, enjoyable life. I think it's the same thing with a business. You know, you gotta take some risks. Yeah, it could fail. You could, some bad things can happen, but all kinds of good things can happen too. You don't really realize
I
your
think
true
you and I
potential.
should become more. I think Kenton and I should become more intimate with each other.
Well, maybe this is
Open yourself up, buddy. Open yourself up. Let me in,
That's something
Kenton.
I want to
Let me
share with
in.
you guys. It's a safe space, right? Well, I think we're getting off topic with the outbound coup. But I think we should have that's probably a good topic for another space one day. But maybe let's bring it back. 8 bytes. Did you want to have? I want to give you some more time
Well,
to.
I have a lot of things. I've been trying to be very patient and listen to everyone else. But like, I
Oh,
haven't
sorry,
really
Boone.
Hey, go ahead.
made my case at all.
Make your
And
case.
yeah, it's kind of frustrating that JP left. Like he spoke quite a bit and I just listened, and then he's not here to listen to what I have to say. So that's a little frustrating, but it is what it is. And so all right. So like my last question was, how feasible is it to stop an attacker? Let's say it is feasible, right? Just for the sake of argument. And then well, actually, here I want to back up even before we talk about this, and I really wish JP was here. Is like, but like, I'll speak, I guess, to Chad and you, Kenton, and like, I mean, I think it's pretty. Like, can we all agree that the base layer is more important to the app layer? Like, the base layer is the core of THORChain, and the app layer is like a nice to have. Like, do we have general agreement on that?
Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say. I would agree with it.
I agree with you.
Cool. All right, and then so I see that there's a distinction between the app layer and Rujira. Like, to me, those are not the same thing. Like, can we agree on that?
Yeah, I'd agree with
Yep.
that too.
All right, cool. And like, so like as a way of analogy, like we can kind of think of them as like three businesses. So like the base layer is like like I said, it's a DEX, it's like Walmart or whatever. And then I look at the app layer. I mean, right now it's permissioned and whitelisted. So like, there's some, but like the app layer is like a landlord, right? It creates infrastructure and then it rents it out to other businesses. And then so Rujira is a third business. It's a tenant of the app layer, and it pays fees to the app layer to access the blockchain, the L1 assets, that kind of stuff. And so I see them as three separate concerns. And so that's part of what informs my thinking of like that they should, like, so I don't see it as the base layer is concerned what Rujira, like if Rujira succeeds or fails, or even the app layer, honestly. Like, a landlord doesn't get involved with its tenants' businesses. It doesn't like run their businesses for them. It just rents them the space and they succeed or fail on their own. Yeah, and like, I don't know if you have like thoughts on that.
No, I'm following you.
I mean, I mean, a landlord has a responsibility to ensure the protection of their tenants,
Well, right, but like if
right?
a
Like,
store, if like one of their tenants gets robbed, that's not the landlord's fault.
it can be depending upon the conditions of how they get robbed.
I mean, if they like get held up at the
Like,
cash register.
if the front gate was broken and it's been broken for 3 months and the landlord never fixed it, then yeah, it's the landlord could be held liable for that.
Okay, but I mean that's not the kind of situation we're really talking about. Like we're talking about a fault in a smart contract. Like, we're not talking about a fault of the execution of the app layer. Like, right? That's like, can we all agree
That's like
that
a
like,
fault in the locks, basically. Like if the locks on the residence were broken.
well, no, like um
Boone, what you're trying to say, I think, to keep an analogy, is that the tenant leaves the gate open or doesn't lock the door.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
The landlord provided the tools
Yeah.
to be secure, but the tenant wasn't utilizing them or used them improperly.
Correct.
And that'd be the idea with the smart contract, is that the developer wrote the code improperly to use THORChain improperly, which introduced an ability for someone to exploit it.
Right, but it's not that it's not that the app layer did anything wrong. It's the tenant did them. It's like the mistake is clearly on them. That's the situation we're talking about.
Yeah. And that's fair, like, but that's like we were saying earlier, like that's up to the node to decide at that time. But that whatever the case and scenario where the app layer was robbed because it's a tenant or whatever the thing is, like we're all gonna have to just look at that individual situation and agree as a community as a whole, uh, what to do to let it fly or not. It's hard to like answer these questions because it's
Right,
such
but
a
you're just
hypothetical that
returning
we
to
don't
the
have all the
can
information.
versus should, which is fine. I'm saying that to my mind, it makes sense to hold Ruggiero solely responsible for a mistake in a Ruggiero smart contract. I mean, like you don't have to agree with me, but like I'm like that's part of the argument that I'm making is like I don't see why the THORChain nodes should be responsible for a mistake made by smart contract devs that like that's not their responsibility is part of my argument. And like again, you can agree or disagree, but that's kind of how I see things. But
I don't think they do it because they feel responsible. I think they do it because it's in their own best
Okay,
interest.
and I'll address that in a second, but I want to stick with, or I want to move forward on like practicalities. Um, so I really wish JP was here, but like, so let's, if an exploit does happen, he said that he would be. One second, let me find the quote. Uh, like the moment he sees a hack, he'll be on Twitter and DMs everywhere pushing nodes to halt, and so now a mistake made by smart contract, like the Rogerian smart contracts, is now affecting all of THORChain. Like the whole chain is halted. So any streaming swap that's going on, paused. Like you can't move Rune around. The entire chain is frozen because, and like, so I don't, like, again, just because a tenant left the door unlocked, now everything is broken. Like that seems very not good to me.
Yeah, so that's a cost, right? Is like we stop doing swaps or we stop signing transactions or whatever the situation might be. That has a cost to it. And so does the cost of letting $100 million go out the door. So the question becomes, as a self-interested node operator, what makes more sense? Am I gonna pause trading for a $10,000 somebody sign a transaction by accident kind of thing? No, I don't think I'd do that. Is it $100 million because of whatever? I think it's might be well worth the cost. Like the cost, you pick your kind of poison there, and one's a lot smaller than the other depending upon
Okay,
the
but like this is something
circumstances.
that we can like kind of model out ahead of time and just like, but there's a lot of costs. Is like, our partner, our integrator partners, like they have certain expectations, like ledger swaps get frozen
Sure,
immediately. Trust wallet, like, do we want to
sure,
damage our business relationships with all our partners because of this? And there's like there's a lot of things to consider, and just like I'm not hearing this, and so I'm just trying to
sure.
raise these concerns.
No, that's a very valid thing to raise, and we're all just gonna have to look at the specifics of that individual circumstance to determine what is the best. Like we pause the chains all the time, when we have reason to do so, right? But we might pause for we paused churn recently because there was like a known bug, for example. We might pause trading because of something or other. I don't know, whatever it is, and we inconvenience our trading partners and our wallet integrations. We do that from time to time because it's in the best interest of the protocol as a net positive to go in that direction versus not doing it. It's conceptually very similar to that, and we just have to decide, like as a community, what makes the most sense for the best survival and the
Sure,
in the
yeah, I'm just
interest of
right.
the
I'm just saying that
protocol.
there's a lot to consider. Is my main point. And then
Sure,
I
that's
next
that's that's why it's like so hard to talk about this though, because like there's a lot to consider to your point, and the nuances and the details of whatever circumstance we find ourselves is so broad, and so there's so many different permutations that could
Well,
exist
I
that
mean,
it's
is
very
that true
hard
though?
to.
To me, the main variable is like how much what's the dollar value of the hack? Like, I mean, are there really that many more permutations? It's like, it's just like,
Yeah, Ken was talking about this earlier, right? Like setting examples of like, was it a hack? Was it a bug? Was it just like, advanced
well,
trading,
no,
quote
we're
unquote,
talking
advanced trading techniques?
specifically like about an exploit or a failure of a smart contract. Like, I'm not talking if any kind of base layer problem, like a vault, an Asgard vault gets endangered. Of course, like that's the whole point of the nodes, is to protect those funds. But like specifically a smart contract exploit, like there's some either an overflow bug or whatever. Like, it's pretty narrow,
Yep.
is the way I see it, and like, it's really just about the dollar value, right?
Yeah, but
Maybe. I mean, this is a scenario where somebody manipulates the price of THORChain's pools to cause a perpetual to,
Right. Yeah, but it doesn't. It's
to
still a
like that.
dollar value, right? At the end of the day,
Well, no, like in that circumstance, like THORChain's protocol participated in the hack, quote
no,
unquote,
because
because its
people are
pool got
obeying the
fucked.
rules. Like, it was manipulated, but it's not like, I mean, like that. It all followed the rules.
Sure, that's fair to say. Yeah.
also what I want to say is that let's assume, like for example, the secured assets is super successful, and it's going to be like 80% of THORChain business through perps and stuff. And then we have to consider like, hey, what happens if the perps something happens with perps? We have to stop this because
Sure.
because the THORChain will be evaluated as the addition of the base app layer as well. I think
Sure. It's a
Well,
valid.
no,
It's a valid
secured
point.
assets are a base layer concern. Like, like they
let,
interact with
let,
the
let,
app layer.
let's say the hack happens on the Rujira, but the Rujira is actually now 4/5 of the business of THORChain. We don't know what the balance of the secured assets and the base swaps business will be. Maybe the secured assets will be so capital efficient that it's going to be the majority of the revenue and the fees for the THORChain. So now THORChain has to take a super like a stiff stance to protect the app layer, because this is the majority of the business and this is how the THORChain will be evaluated and the rune token will be evaluated. So we cannot just take this a stiff chance that we have to protect the base layer. What if the majority of the business is going to be the app layer, the Rujira, all the 50 upcoming apps that's going to generate a lot of fees? We have to
I
like,
mean, okay, so, like, yeah. So I've thought, I've obviously thought this through, and like my answer is yes. You're absolutely right. In the short term, there would be a loss of TVL, a loss of income, all of that, and it would absolutely be to the detriment of THORChain, right? Like, I don't think anyone's arguing that. I'm not arguing that. What I am arguing is long term. I think it like to credible neutrality is more valuable than the short-term loss of capital and TVL and income. Like, that's my personal
Uh,
like.
I think that's more about censorship really than what the notes. Like the way I see it is like if a hacker can exploit or do things outside or exogenous of the system or even internally within the system, right? Well, if nodes can do the same thing with their tools too, right? So, but I mean, like you said, right, and really to highlight, right, is with SUI, right? It's like 34% can censor a transaction on its network, right? So you could be a legitimate user, and let's say, for example, Donald Trump just doesn't like you, right? And depending, you don't know how many of those validators he knows or doesn't know, or right, it's not really, but if they can reach consensus on a single signer, right, or essentially like a single wallet, right, and say, okay, well, this one will just ignore all transactions from, well, then that's really where you get into like that social problem where people go, well, not your. A perfect example is just right now, like I get those alerts, right, saying like, oh, there's something happening in your city, right? So I mean, like, well, how much control is there over my own device, right? So
I honestly don't quite follow where you're going there, but like I just want to kind of repeat the point I was trying to make, which is to answer with the Coke's question is like I don't think nation states would be buying Bitcoin if after the Mountain Gox hack they had forked the chain and undid the hack, right? Like and so the price of Bitcoin suffered for a long time. Tons of people lost money. And so in the short term, it was really bad for Bitcoin. But long term, it proved the credible neutrality of Bitcoin. And to me, that's why Bitcoin has the value it does now. And so, I mean, and again, people are free to disagree with me, but I think it is short sighted
Yeah,
to plug
I
holes.
I agree and disagree with you, and I will give my perspective. Of course, for the reason why I agree is that I do see THORChain as a immutable layer as well. So whoever comes through, is it the hacker or not? It's not our business. We as a THORChain, we are set up as a being immutable. Just we do the thing that we do, and we don't ask any questions. I love it. But at the same time, as you mentioned, like Bitcoin went through this not forking, and Mt. Gox went through, is that how I see blockchains is that every blockchain is here to solve some kind of business, and Bitcoin is here to be this layer that we know what's going to happen with Bitcoin. We know how many Bitcoins there is going to be in the future, and they will never censor. So every other blockchain that comes around don't have to solve the same problem, the censorship problem. Like if you want to swap with the THORChain, you can do it. The most important is that you don't get stopped mid swap. Whatever happens with the hack, you don't care. You just use THORChain, but it's from the user perspective, of course. You don't care what happens with THORChain. So I'm torn in a sense. In a sense, I want to be like this immutable, but at the same time, Bitcoin is immutable, and we don't have to solve the same problem.
Sure, but I guess like I see just unlimited potential for the app layer. And to me, credible neutrality is the foundation of that potential. Like, I mean, as far as I know, the Bybit hack this February was the largest hack ever, right? It was 1.4 billion. And Ethereum just processed it. Like the Ethereum nodes did not get involved. So like it's not just Bitcoin. I think Ethereum is also credibly neutral. And it has, like uninterrupted uptime ever since it launched. So like, I mean, those are qualities that lend trust. And I think like there's a reason like BlackRock put like 100 million on Ethereum and not any other smart contract chain. And like
Yeah.
I think that credible neutrality is incredibly important, and it's one of those in like Chad brought up is like, oh well, Bitcoin fixed the mint bug and the DAO hack is like anytime you break that credible neutrality, people will talk about it 15 years later. That's how important it is like, and so it's also pretty binary. It's like you do it once and then there's always question, will they do it again? And so
Yeah.
like
I am team neutral as well. So everybody knows, I'm team neutral as well. I think short term we could get some I don't know, some couple of like good notes from the people, but long run there is in a long run. Let's just speak about nations. As soon as they make not neutrable decisions, at the end they will like they will fall. Switzerland is a good example, staying neutral as long as possible, and they have been thriving. They haven't taken part of European Union, this and that. So I'm team neutral as well. I think it's the best way to go.
right.
Boone.
Oh, go ahead, Ken.
Do you mind if I throw an idea out there, or do you want to keep going? Are you done making your? Are you done?
Well, I mean, I probably have a few other thoughts, but I'm like, I want it to be a conversation. So yeah, please throw your stuff out there.
So I have no idea this is possible. I'm just kind of brainstorming with you guys. I agree with your analogy. You got THORChain to base layer, then there's app layer, then there's Regira on top of app layer, and Regira is like a tenant with THORChain. We're the landlord, and Regira should live and die by the success of their smart contracts. I've been wondering maybe if there's a way to do that where, you guys are familiar with AutoStake's idea about cold vaults, where the THORChain nodes have like, I don't know, 50% of the keys, and a few trusted individuals have the rest of the keys. And this is a way to scale secured assets on THORChain, way to scale app layer. And so I've been wondering is, well, what if the Regira devs, they have basically 2 of the 3 keys, and the THORChain nodes have the other 1 key. And the Regira devs are in control of the secured assets that are being used by their app, by their smart contracts. And then if there's an exploit, the Rugi devs, they're the ones who understand their code. Like they're the ones that are going to tell the THORChain nodes if it's an exploit or not, right? They understand how their contract's supposed to work. Why put it on to the THORChain nodes? They can just decide themselves if that's the
Most likely the funds has moved out of the contract by that point, right?
oh. But don't they? But they control the secured assets. But you're saying the
But in
secured
my
assets moved out
thinking,
of
secured
the
assets are
contract?
a base layer
You're saying
concern, and they should not be handed over to especially Regira. I mean, like they shouldn't even be on the app layer. Is my, if we're drawing this distinction, to me, the secured assets are a base layer concern.
you're saying that you're saying that maybe Rugi should have the ability to pause secured assets, which is to Boone's point, that's a base layer thing. To be honest, I don't think that even really matters because if somebody you wouldn't steal a bunch of money and then just kind of sit on it as a secured asset. You would try to exit into Bitcoin typically, right, to get away from the THORChain's validators as fast as possible, and from Rugi as fast as possible. Like that's what I would do if I was hacking Rugi. I would get the money out from the THORChain network as fast as possible.
So it'd be out of
So
secured assets before anyone could react, and it'd already be into
probably
a
Well, no,
layer
because
1
it'd
of the
be
token.
within.
outbound. The outbound delay would protect the secured assets.
Well, no, if as soon as it becomes an outbound delay, it's like it's already out of a secured asset. The secured asset's already destroyed at that point, and it's just sitting in a queue that's waiting to be signed by the protocol. You
Well,
know what I
right,
mean?
but
At that
if the
point, it's already.
THORChain nodes are getting involved, they can still freeze the assets. Is I think
That's true. On the outbound delay, they can, right? But that kind of makes Kenton's point a bit moot because the Rugi team would
right.
not
No,
have the
agreed.
ability
Yeah,
to
yeah,
do
yeah.
anything. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Darn.
yeah. I think like for me, like I'm not a neutral in all scenarios kind of mentality. For me, I am not for it and I'm not against it. I will just look at the individual situation that we're in and make a determination upon like how I feel about things. And sometimes maybe I'll be for freezing funds, and maybe times I'll be against it. It just depends on the circumstances.
Yeah, but
Sure.
That's
the
how I
issue
look
is
at it.
that you have to pause the network to decide. So that's the issue.
Right.
Yeah, but that's what's going to happen. Like as soon as like there's some exploit and there's like a outbound delay thing, whatever, somebody's going to do a make pause, really really
Well,
quickly. I
and
would hope,
this
right?
can I?
that's
Yeah.
And
what we're discussing on, right? Should it
Well,
pause or not?
but but like like even if I'm for the idea of the funds leaving the network, I would still do a make pause in that scenario because we should we should always even just take the vote, because if you just let the funds go away, then you didn't even take the vote. Like you didn't even give the opportunity to the validators to even voice a perspective on this thing. You should do a make pause or like halt signing or something, whatever it is, to just give the nodes 12 hours, 18 hours, whatever, to
yeah, but do
make a
we want to
determination
halt the chain for
of
18 hours? Like I don't.
sure, yeah. I mean, we've done that so many times in the past. Like it's not always a good thing, but it's not that big of a deal,
I
to be honest.
mean, yeah, I go, as you keep
It's
saying,
not a
it
big
is
deal when we're small, but if we
right.
become the
Yes,
biggest exchange in the world,
exactly.
it does become a big deal.
I mean,
And
Coinbase does it from time to time as well. I mean, it's just it's a thing of an exchange. It's like
right, but
if you
Yeah, but
it's
it doesn't count
undesirable.
because my neighbor beats up the wife. It doesn't mean that we should do it time to time. Like
Right.
we,
And here, I want to try
I
to
mean,
make it
what's
more
more important to
concrete since we're kind of getting there. This is like a thread of conversation. So whenever the Bybit hack was going through THORChain, there was a lot of chaos, right? Some nodes halted the Ethereum and then other nodes unhalted it, and it was like back and forth. And so I kind of have like 2 points is like right now, like what would an actual and like how long would it, and Chad, you can probably answer this, how long would it take to write a store migration and get that implemented? Like what is involved with a store migration?
if there was like an emergency situation, we wanted to do a store migration as like as
Right,
fast as
yeah.
possible. We could do it within 30 minutes, I would think, or an hour before the release is out, and then it just takes whatever time it takes for nodes
Right,
to
and
do
so,
the
I
actual
mean, like,
like
how
update.
long are we gonna let the network stay paused and then, like, how do you determine when a vote's done, right? Because like, it's until it gets 2/3, like, how
I think
long do you
that'd be before the store migration even starts, right? So
well, that's
like once the validators vote on it,
mm,
then you can proceed to do it.
well, but there's not necessarily a vote until the store migration is implemented, unless you could do a vote ahead of time, but, like, we haven't talked about that yet, and this is one of the things that
Well, I think the act of saying like halt signing, I'm going to vote halt signing, and then Kenton's going to vote to vote a zero. I'm going to vote a one, and then someone else will vote a zero. Someone votes a one. Like that is the vote
well,
before the migration has even been
but
written.
you need 2/3 to do the migration. You don't need 2/3 to halt the chain, right? And so, like, let's say
Correct.
50% of the nodes are down to do the store migration, but like you need more than 50%. You need 2/3. So,
Yeah.
well, right. So
Sure.
like there should be some kind of signaling before the store migration is even attempted to see if it's worth it or not. And so this is like one of the ideas. And actually, so Code Hans from Ruji in the Discord like brought up a great thing. It's like if the THORChain nodes are going to intervene, then we should create tooling to make that a lot easier. Like right now, it's really messy and it's like a bad user experience across the board for THORChain nodes to intervene. And so if they are going to intervene, then we should create tooling to make it a lot easier for them to address an exploit. And so like we could have a vote, a non-binding or just like a signal vote. So it doesn't actually change anything. It's not like changing a mirror, but it's like, what is the THORChain? Are we interested in developing tooling to make intervening on the app layer easier? And then see what that vote looks like.
That's every
Yeah.
variance.
For me, the vote to like halt signing, for example, on the ETH chain, because let's imagine it's an ETH asset being sent out. That is the vote. That is the kind of you're expressing in that moment whether you want to let the funds go out and sign, or don't sign, don't let the funds go out, and let's do a migration. Like that is the thing you're asking for to me.
Or holding the chain is not a 2/3 vote.
No, you only need 3 no's, but then you can have 4 no's vote against it, then 5 no's for it, and then 4 no then, like, like, it's a way of people like, and we saw this during the whole Bybit thing of, like, it halted and then it resumed, and, like, we just went from, like, 49% said no, and then 51% said no, and then it kinda, like, went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, which is I think exactly what you want to happen anyway,
I
right?
mean, I would rather that not happen. I think the less chaos, the better. Like,
Sorry, but what's the point? Like, if you're gonna wait until you have 2/3 majority to vote, yes, we're going to, halt trading and do a more migration, but we're not gonna do it
no,
for
I guess
18
what I would
hours.
say is like, let's say they notice a hack, nodes halt the chain, and then you have a signal
How many
vote.
wait, how
You
many
have a
nodes halt
signal vote.
How many
Whatever,
nodes?
3, right? It's 3 to halt the chain, right, for an hour.
Yeah, but then 4 vote to resume it.
That's all right. That's
And then what?
possible. Again, I'm trying to like
It's not possible. It's what happened in the Bybit thing. It's what
Chad.
would
I
happen. It's not possible. It's what
understand.
would happen.
But I'm saying, what if we created a social consensus that in the event of an exploit, 3 nodes halt the chain, and then instead of going back and forth with halting, unhalting, instead there is an immediate vote that goes up. Is like, are there 2/3 of nodes that support doing a store migration, and it's just like a signal vote.
Sure. I mean, that already works in the code today. You could do that right now if you
Right.
wanted to.
Okay. And so I'm saying that would be a lot less messy than halting, unhalting, and like, and so like it would be great if we had
I
an
mean,
agreement. This is how we're gonna handle things if a hack happens, rather than figuring out on the fly as we go. Like it'd be better to have a plan in place ahead of time.
Well, that would be what Sui did, really.
Okay. Yeah, and then so some of my last kind of points is so, and again, I wish JP was here, but I'm pretty sure he wrote ADR 20, right? That's like the one that's up. That was him. Can anyone confirm, deny?
I don't know for sure. I think it was him, but I'm not
Okay.
sure about it.
But like, so he wrote on that document that like app security, the app layer is designed with a strict separation of concerns from THORChain's base layer. He further wrote, impact isolation. If an exploit occurs, only the users of the affected app are impacted. The base layer and its liquidity pools remain unaffected. He also wrote, no elevated privileges. Contracts cannot mint or burn secured assets or interfere with base layer consensus. Their rights are no greater than any other regular user with a Thor address. And I mean, that, I don't know. I like that. To me, that matches with how I think is like the app layer is a nice to have on top of the base layer. The app layer should not be negatively impacting the base layer.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know anybody who would disagree with that.
Okay, and I
I
think,
I think that's the design right now, right? With secured assets.
well, but I mean,
Yeah.
if the if we're halting the chain, then the app layer is negatively impacting the base layer.
Oh, okay, I see what you're getting at.
Yeah, yeah, right. But also, if they get hacked and $100 million goes out the door, then that also
But
negatively impacts the base
that's
layer.
on Rajira, right? And then like
No, no, but also means that we are
yeah, but
collecting less
someone
fees,
else
for example.
will like stand up a different, theoretically more secure, and the TVL will come back, right? Like, especially if the app layer is neutral, then like it'll come back.
What if Binance is hacked
Maybe.
and their 60 million rune is stolen and gets dumped? Is that something the THORChain nodes you think would intervene on and stop? The reason I'm asking that is because I like Boone what you said about the app layer and the smart contracts have no more or less rights or permission than an individual uh, Rune wallet address the user has, and so in my mind, then they should be treated the same. Whether you're one person with a Rune wallet or a smart contract with a Rune wallet, you get treated the same way. And my suspicion is if Binance is hacked and the Rune is stolen and they go dump it, we have to let it go. I mean, that's even though it'd be in our interest, the node's interest to stop it, do store migration or something. But then
Yeah, 60 million rune being sold through the pools into Bitcoin and Ether,
That
like
would nuke.
affect that would be the end of the protocol, I think. We're very close to it, at least.
and so are you insinuating that the nodes may want to stop and intervene and do something about it?
I think they would have to, otherwise they would see their multi-million
Like
dollar investment go to
yeah,
zero.
I mean the next block is mutable, right? Code Hans actually pointed that out in the same discussion on Discord. But like essentially, like if right, like it really is like nodes can do whatever they want on the next block. What really matters is that the previous or preceding blocks, once they've been signed, right, it's kind of like set in stone. So, I mean, if you wanted to remain agnostic, even if that would destroy the protocol, the best way would be to like privatize the transactions themselves. So that way nodes, like let's say it's like a ZK snark implementation, so nodes don't have an idea of who the inbound, outbound, and amount is. Well, then you could say that like, oh, okay, well, there was nothing we could do about it, right? And then that'd be a design, that'd be a part of the design itself. So if you have a right, but if there's visibility on it, right, and the fact that nodes are the ones that sign the transactions, it kind of just goes back to the whole idea of, well, you know, it's the node's judgment at the time it happens, right? And if let's say, for example, a majority of nodes didn't want to have that responsibility, well, then they can make an ADR, right, to privatize transactions, and then just moving forward, right, they wouldn't have visibility, so they wouldn't need to even worry about acting on an event like that.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting like the question almost always comes down to what's more important to you as a node operator, um profitability and that kind of thing of like self-interest and financial self-interest, or idealistic um you know idealistic um
Well, I just
neutrality,
want to
you
just
know.
clarify that. Like, what I'm arguing is it's actually in the node operator's long-term financial self-interest to stay neutral. And like that's what I'm arguing is like long-term they will come out ahead by staying neutral. Is I am convinced of that.
Yeah, I mean, like that's a point viewpoint you can have, and maybe you're right about that. Maybe you're not. It's kind of quite difficult to say, to be honest. Um, I think, but most people, as just as humanity, thinks more in the short term than they do in the long term. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
And they're gonna look for the short term gains rather than the long term, even if they believe, even if they agree with
Right.
your
Well, I
viewpoint
mean, and
here,
again,
which
like
I
no
think
one's
is debatable.
debating that 2/3 of nodes can do whatever they want. Like that. I mean, of course, that's the situation, right? Like that's not. No one's arguing that.
Well, I think your stance that it's in the best interest of the nodes long term to let Ruji collapse or fail or whatever in a hypothetical scenario. That's a very like controversial opinion. Like some people are going to agree with you, and
Sure,
some
but
people are
like I
not. It's
mean,
going
there's
to be a
also like an
pretty.
element of moral hazard. Like if Ruji knows that they have to stand or fall on their own efforts, they're going to be way more careful writing their smart contracts. They're going to have caps in place. Like, but if they know, oh, it doesn't really matter what we do because the nodes got us, then they're going to be a lot loosey goosey. And
I mean, that's definitely not true. Like as a developer, you're not like I'm going to put more effort in because I'm aware that we might lose it all. Like that's just not a. You always put full effort in, and
well,
you're
but
you're
like, all
making
right, but
every
like
effort you can,
launching with caps
whether there's a
versus
safety
not
net or
launching
not.
with caps, right? There's I don't believe you that there's that it would be identical if they knew that no matter what happens, no one is bailing them out. I think things would be at least slightly different than if they, well, if something does happen, the chain's going to get halted and the funds are going to get saved. Like, I just, that's human nature.
Yeah, I mean, and that's also like a gamble that it is caught. Like maybe it's not for some reason or whatever. You know, like if they don't like Ruji doesn't actually know whether or not the chain will halt or not. Like they think it could happen, and it may happen, but they don't know that's going to be the case. Like to your point about the example of somebody stealing a bunch of rune and then like transferring it to a kraken or whatever the hell it is. Like, are we going to freeze on that? I don't know. Maybe we're not. Like I have no idea. Neither do you or anybody else for that matter, including the developers over at Ruji. So they are like as JP said earlier, and I share his viewpoint because we both went through it. Like that day you wake up and there's been a hack and there's like millions of dollars gone. Like it's very hard to articulate how difficult that is as a developer and how like the worst nightmares come to place. You have everybody yelling at you and you got to figure out a way out of this and make all the users whole again. And it's very hard to describe how hard that is to go through. And I don't know, the experience of every Ruby developer, but like I'm sure they're all well hyper aware of not wanting to wake up the next day and having $100 million just kind of missing from their contract, and then having to deal with that fucking other disaster and difficult
No,
situations.
of course, and I'm
I
not
think
saying, of course, they're gonna do their best job. I'm not trying to like speak ill of them. I'm just like there is an element of moral hazard.
Yeah.
Like I think that's pretty just like obvious.
yeah, I think what Boone
Yeah.
meant is like as an individual coder, like a developer, everybody will do their best. It doesn't matter if they know like if the THORChain nodes got them or they don't have them their backs. But it's just like the structure how I think things will be built. If you know that you have like this safe cushion, maybe you will be like, yeah, you don't have caps, this and that. But if you know that you're whole responsible for everything, you will build the gaps, outbounds, delays. You just like think a little bit ahead. Nobody's second guessing like if the individual is working their best.
I have to take off, guys. I have to put my daughter down for the night. But
Yeah,
good
really
chatting with you,
appreciate
Kenton and
you.
Boone and
Have a
Eight
good night.
Bites
Yeah,
and
thanks, Chad.
everybody else.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Chad.
Appreciate your
Yeah, you
time,
too.
guys. Yeah, I'll stop in another time,
Please.
I'm sure.
All right. Good night. Take
Later,
care.
guys.
Maybe I have to get going here soon too, guys. Maybe we should start wrapping this up a bit. Boone, did you want to? Did anything kind of? You want to like do any conclusion? Any final thoughts? Any other point you want to bring up?
Yeah, I think I've mostly covered everything. I just want to maybe reiterate one kind of thing, and this touches on the whole 2/3 of nodes can do whatever they want, and I kind of like want to reiterate my stance that like running a DEX is very different than a smart contract platform. And like again, a DEX should be self-interested. It's profit maximizing. It needs to iterate, right? It's like so it needs to be mutable. It needs to be like adapt to market conditions, and like that's a good thing. Like I love that we update quickly, and like yeah, we can halt the chain if we need to. Like that's all. Those are all good qualities for a DEX. A smart contract platform should be the opposite. It should be boring, predictable, unchanging. Like the rules are the rules, and that's that. And like that's again, the credible neutrality is, I think, the largest valuable proposition of any given smart contract platform. And so, just even though the same nodes are running both businesses, I see them as very different businesses, very different concerns, and they should be ran differently. And that kind of sums up, yeah, my position.
Great.
I will agree with Boone. One thing is like government, and the other thing is individual. They both want to get ahead, but trust me, individual will be doing more to get more ahead. So yeah, it's different DEX and smart contract platform. I don't agree with Boone.
And I totally, Boone, I totally agree what you're saying about the long-term value of being neutral, permissionless, uncensorable. I agree with that. I mean, to me, in my opinion, that's the whole point of crypto, right? If not, it's just TradFi, right? We're just replacing the same system. We're just rebuilding the system we're trying to replace. But I also do appreciate, I think where Chad and JP are coming from, they're saying it's basically going to be a risk reward analysis, a cost benefit analysis to the nodes. You know, they're running a business. Is it worth it for the nodes long term to intervene, to censor a specific transaction, to reverse anything, or is it better to stay neutral? And it's not. If I understand their position, it's not as obvious. It's not a clear cut thing. But philosophically, you can make the case, you know, always do this and that. It may not work out economically. Yeah, I don't know if I don't think we've solved anything, but it sounds like the threshold in my mind is like an economic one. You know, at what point is losing this much money going to affect THORChain or not? It seems like that's, you know, where is that line?
Right. And yeah, I mean, if we could, you know, if draw, I guess JP has some kind of draft drawn up of like thresholds and whatnot. That would be great to see. Hopefully he publishes that soon. And man, I just had another thought. It just escaped me.
I would say as long as we have 2/3 deciding what's going to happen, the thresholds doesn't matter. The THORChain was a clear example. Like we had the whole THORChain in a like a limbo, like is it going to survive or not? And the nodes step in and said like we don't care about the individual savers and sins, like we have to save the chain itself. So I feel like we kind of had this like a drill already where we decided like we will save the chain before maybe.
Well, I would just draw the distinction, like as I keep saying, it is the node's responsibility to protect the base layer, and so that, I mean, the base layer would have died if THORChain hadn't been paused. So like, I think that was the correct thing to do, because the DEX is different than the smart contract. But like the way I think I really like the design of the app layer. I think the separations between the base layer and the app layer are very robust, and I really struggle to imagine how the app layer could negatively impact the base layer in any way. So really the only danger, the only threat that an exploit on the app layer poses is a loss of income. And that's business, and that's crypto. Like if people mess up and get hacked and we lose some income for a while, that's just the name of the game. But like I really don't think that the app layer can actually threaten the base layer.
Let's hope
That's
so.
a fair point.
Yeah, I'm in agreement.
Well, I agree with you philosophically too. The way I've been thinking about it is, you guys know the expression, you kill one person, you're a murderer. You kill a million, you're a king. So it's kind of, I think it's a similar, where's the threshold, right? At what point do you stop being a murderer and start becoming a king, right? Where is that? Where is it? And I think it's kind of the same idea here with THORChain, that if $1 is exploited, okay, whatever, let it go. If it's 10 million or 100 million, okay, then we intervene and do something. It seems like what I'm hearing from JP and Chad, that's kind of like their position. They're just going to be like, well, we're just going to have to see where it lies on that spectrum, and then decide from there.
It's like walking a tightrope, right?
Yeah. Well, guys, the point of this wasn't to solve anything. I mean, if we did, great, but we don't have to. I'm sure the conversation will keep having it, keep going. I think it's great. And if anyone's listening, if you're going to start using app layer, just be careful, right? The same with THORChain. It's new. Something bad could happen. There could be an exploit, whatever. Obviously, no one wants that. Everyone's trying their best to prevent that. And even if all the nodes agreed, let's say we did come to a conclusion today, and all the nodes would intervene to stop an exploit on app layer. It doesn't necessarily mean they'll be successful. Maybe they could get out in time, something like that. So, if you're going to use app layer, and don't expect the nodes to bail you out either. Always, just be careful to start, please. I think a lot of people went into THORChain kind of with blinders on, but don't go into app layer with blinders on. At least give it some time to prove itself and show that it's okay, it's safe.
I just want to bring back one other point, is like, if there's enough nodes that do agree with intervention, then I do think new tooling needs to be built out to make intervening less friction and solve it faster. Yeah, so if intervention is a possibility, it should be easier than like writing a store migration, halting, unhalting. Like there's if you look at the Discord, Hans had some suggestions about specific features that could be built that don't currently exist, but could be built to make intervening less painful to the base layer. And so if we are going to intervene, I do think we should, again, I don't want us to intervene, but if we do, we should build out those tools.
And also too, as a node operator, I'm like, the idea of following app layer and all these different contracts and things that go wrong is like, I don't want to. That's way too much work, right? So the devs who are writing that code or running those platforms, I hope they're getting involved running nodes so that if they see a problem with their, with their contracts, they can hit the make pause. I'm willing to bet everyone a beer that all the other node operators feel similar to me. Like it's, the THORChain node operator's job shouldn't be to keep track of all the different stuff going on app layer. It's to protect the private keys of the vaults, right? That's it. So hopefully that encourages the devs on the app layer to get involved in running nodes. So, they can have, if they want to make pause, that things should be done, then they can do it. They're not relying on other people to do it.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much on point, right? It's should be the developer's responsibility for what they write. So,
Hey, Bice, did you have anything else you want to say or bring up? You've been patient for a while.
well, just you know what, it's crypto. It's always been about learning what you're dealing with and understanding how it works. Terra Luna is by and far the best example I can give, right? You should understand like the type of protocols you're interacting with. I always recommend to learn how to read Solidity and smart contracts, so that way you can understand like how it's interacting, do your own check on it, sanity checks, and apart from that, well, if something happens, there really isn't like a authoritative body in crypto, right? 66% is 67% is consensus. So you as an individual, right, and a self-thinking agent, and if you don't want to end up in that kind of situation, or if you don't want to end up in a situation where you can have your wallet censored, uh, educate yourself and understand the potential consequences.
Great, thanks for that. Alrighty, guys. Well, if there's nothing else,
Yeah, I just
wrap
want to
this
thank
up.
you so much, Kenton, for proposing this space and hosting. And yeah, so thanks.
Yeah, thanks for
Yeah,
coming.
thank you so much.
Yeah, I think it's like, people. I'm not saying you guys, but like, some people will get on Twitter or Discord, and it, can turn into. But seems like it's an argument or people are fighting, and it's like it's just there's such. They're not the best tools for communicating, right? And like people are in different time zones, throughout the day, everything's broken up. It's just good to get in and talk, right? Like, yeah, I think it's so much better, so much healthier. So, yeah, glad you guys came. I'm glad Chad came. I didn't.